something that's forgotten much too often, and that's homelessness in our city. And when I came in, we have this great group called the Detroit Hand Network. They do a phenomenal job of coordinating outreach efforts in shelters. But even the finest shelter is limited. What does a shelter do? A shelter keeps you safe for the night and lets you go the next morning. Now that's valuable and it's often life-saving. But if you're dealing with addiction or mental health issues or financial issues, it doesn't help. You're looking for a place to go the next day. And so, under Arthur Jemison's lead, we decided to move towards something called permanent supportive housing. That instead of having folks be sheltered for the night, let's get people the homeless into their own room at a site where they've got addiction counselors on site, they got mental health services on site, they got resume help on site. And so, in 2017, we opened right down the street from Little Caesars Arena, the Charlotte, a 27-unit apartment. And one of the first residents to move in was a woman by the name of Pam Hart. And I got to meet Pam Hart, and you're about to meet her. And so she moved in and had a remarkable story. She had been a security guard at Motor City Casino for more than 10 years, had a good job, was plagued by bouts of depression, couldn't deal with the mental illness, couldn't go to work, got fired from her job, lost her apartment, living in her car and on the street. And she happened, she tells me, to be in front of greater grace with everything in her world in her duffel bag at the bus stop when somebody from the church came up and said, you know, they've got this permanent supportive housing location at Charlotte where you can get help. And I got to meet Pam Hart, who moved in. And I said, how is it? And she says, it's heaven. No park benches, no cots, and I have a key. All right? So, she seemed like a nice person. I didn't think a lot more of it. And then as we continue to build across this city, we are now converting at Peterborough Place 70 units, so we have 70 more units of permanent supportive housing. And then we're building 56 more units in Midtown. These are being built in areas that are on bus lines, which means that you might think it's strange that in downtown and Midtown we're doing this, but we have to make sure that these folks have service on a bus line. So we're putting them in our prime property. It's what we should be doing. And then my friend Reverend Jim Holley called me, and he said, you know, you got this abandoned building that's been here about 15 years next to a school and right by my church, and every Sunday the congregation has to go by this. You said you were going to do something about these abandoned buildings. Would you get this out of here? And I said, well, it seems like a reasonable request. But when we looked at it, we found out the building was solid. In fact, Arthur Jemison came back and said, this would be a great place for permanent supportive housing. So I went back to Reverend Holley. And I said, Reverend, I know you thought I was going to knock it down. What would you think if we took the homeless and transitioned them there? And he says, that would be wonderful. I'll bring them into my congregation. I'll minister to them to myself. That's what we should be doing. And so that's what we did. We built permanent supportive housing at that site. So I go with Reverend Holley to the announcement. And you see the young woman who's speaking there? I hadn't seen her in a while. Her name's Pam Hart. And I said, what are you doing here? And she says, this permanent supportive housing is great. I've got the mental health services I need. I got a job. They hired me. I'm a mentor now, and I'm working. And so 1 year later, a woman who's living on the street is standing up at a press conference in front of TV cameras talking about her company's project. It said CCIH. So project was about to get announced, and it did. It was beautiful, as you can see from the pictures, beautifully restored. We announced it last week, opened it, and people have moved in, but Pam Hart almost wasn't there. And I want to tell you a story about a Detroit hero. So as I talked to her again, I said, how's it going? She says, I got promoted. Now I've got a state license. I'm a permanent supportive housing advisor. I am working with the people who are coming in, and now I got a key role. Except 6 weeks ago, she had a heart attack. And her doctor said, you know what, Ms. Hart? You've done your share. It's time for somebody else. She says, oh, no, I haven't. She says, I got to be there when St. Rita's open. She says, I'm going back to work. And she nagged that doctor every single day till finally on February 24th, he signed off. And one of the great days of my life was cutting the ribbon with Pam Hart on February 27th. And so when we talk about being a city for everybody, it's not the city that has the hard part. The hard part here was a Pam Hart who had to overcome homelessness and a heart attack to contribute. And I believe there's a lot of Pam Harts in this city. People who have ability, but they thought their talents just weren't valued. And I'm here today to say, to bring this city back, we need everybody. We need you. And at this point, I want to recognize somebody that I think, as much as anybody else, typifies the city of Detroit. We may have been discarded once, but we're coming back. Let's close this with a great ovation. Pam Hart, please stand up. God bless you, Pam. God bless you, Detroit. Have a great night.